Our guest for today is Eyal Itzkovitch, the founder of DeepDAO, which is the discovery engine for DAO ecosystem with more than 11,000 organizations listed. First of all, Eyal, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Neil. Good to be here.
Thanks for being here. Please introduce yourself a bit, your background, what led you to found DeepDAO, and what's DeepDAO all about?
So I'm Eyal. I'm the founder of DeepDAO, and I've been in software and product for some 20 years, both in the US and Israel. Worked at Apple in the US a little bit. And since I came back to Israel, I was also active in all sorts of communities. And these communities had an ambition to be, we called it flat, which means that each person has a vote and each person has a voice, and we listen to everybody and we take everybody's opinion into account. And I saw with my own experience, how these good intentions deteriorate time and again. And no matter what you do, power always concentrates in the hands of 3 or 4 people. And then, depending on the identity of the DNA of the group, the activists or people just get dejected and leave, and the group falls apart. So I realized after a while that there's a system-wide problem here, and that we're not solving it. We don't know how to solve it as humans. And I stopped doing this, stopped being part of these groups. And
by saying these groups, you're talking about companies like Apple and all the other organizations?
No, actually, no.
All right.
Apple was not moved very much when I left Apple. But I'm talking about groups that had a progressive agenda. Like, for example, we're in Tel Aviv, so City for All, Ir Lekulanu, if you know that movement, ran for City Hall in 2008 and 2013, had wonderful agenda, and the idea was that it's an activists movement, so everybody's voice counts. And I'm talking about groups like that.
Got it. So we are talking about 2008, 2000. You gave the example. So you gave that example. Right. So we are talking way back. What's made you back then follow that passion and start the initiative of DeepDAO? What was the mission back then?
Okay, so back then I really wanted to do good things in the world. You know, just like many people in technology, actually. Yeah. And then happened what I just told you, and then I stopped being an activist, basically. Then in 2017, I started getting interested in crypto, and in 2018, I looked at the first DAO platform white papers, and immediately, 1, fell in love, and 2, felt that there is a real good chance that this technology will solve problems that we had, the system-wide problem that I saw. And so I joined the first DAO, first big DAO that was around, Genesis Alpha by DAOstack. DAOstack is also an Israeli company, by the way. And started creating proposals, voting, chatting with people on Telegram. And after a while, I really wanted to see a DAO explorer so that we can understand what's going on inside the data, and to have the promise of transparency come true. And so I asked the team to create one, and nobody cared. And then I just created a proposal on the DAO and got some play money and created the DeepDAO POC myself. And
started up your DeepDAO, I mean, from a DAO itself, from the DAO that you were a part of.
Yes, DeepDAO was born in a DAO.
Amazing. And when was it exactly?
That was in 2020.
In 2020, all right. And who was the core team? Everyone that gathered around, and you talked about the POC, was the guys within the DAO that you were a part of, right?
Yes.
And currently, fast forward to today, give us an overview of DeepDAO.
So DeepDAO has grown a lot since then. At first, the first version had 7 DAOs from one platform. Now we have over 10K DAOs, over 11K DAOs actually from several platforms and several chains. The ecosystem has grown a ton. the first time I aggregated financial information, I think for about 25 DAOs, there were just over 1 million or $2 million. And now we're talking about 12 billion. So I don't even know to calculate the percentage, like 100x or whatever. And in terms of how many people in DAOs, so in 2020, there were maybe 200, 300 people that actually knew what DAOs are. And now we're talking about millions. There are like over 6 million people who hold governance tokens, which means they have power in DAOs. Mm-hmm. And there are close to 2 million voters, which are people who actually execute this power in DAOs.
Amazing, amazing. And before we are gonna dive into on-chain data, how we can leverage it, whether we are as a founder or as a business, I wanna go back and even way before 2008 and talk about DAOs in general, since it's an example of taking a very primal thing that made us the sapiens survive and thrive together in groups. And each DAO, obviously, it's a decentralized autonomous organization. If we should have maybe mentioned it at the beginning, but each one of the DAOs has, obviously, as you said, its own use case and mission. But generally speaking, I want to cover that before we are moving forward. What would you say are the advantages and the opportunities of founding or becoming a part of DAO instead of just joining a community on Facebook or WhatsApp group?
Okay, so there are several things. First of all, I agree with you that this goes way back. People always gathered in groups. It's one of the things that we do as human beings. And we've been doing this for a long time and in various ways. And I think DAOs, those crypto decentralized autonomous organizations, are completely the evolution of many of the trends that happened in groups. Now, specifically for the DAOs that you can find on DeepDAO, they all manage assets on the blockchain. When you compare to a Facebook group does not manage assets. Potentially, in fact, it's not necessarily 100% correct. Facebook groups don't manage financial assets, but they do manage non-tangible assets, like maybe a neighborhood group or a group of some particular interest, like people who want to do cycling in Tel Aviv. So these groups do have a goal, and they do have an asset, which is again the goal translates into an asset of sorts. But on the blockchain, you can definitely manage financial assets. Now, I think this is one thing, and now there's also a pretty big cultural change which is happening around crypto. Mm-hmm. And I think this is, if you look at, for example, a platform like Facebook, the platform is collecting your data, and then it's hiding it from you. You don't really know what Facebook knows about you, not really. And then it's using it for its business.
Basically, yeah.
Exactly. And in crypto, for example, if you look at the DeepDAO is making all the data available for everyone. And that's possible because the data is on the blockchain, and therefore it's transparent. It's open source of sorts. So instead of hiding the data from the user, we're giving the data to the user. It's a completely cultural change.
Yep.
Which I think is
one
huge.
Of the main components of Web3 in general, but we are seeing it being kind of enforced or just integrate as part of DAOs.
Yes, absolutely.
You mentioned data, and specifically on-chain data, which is always a great way, data in general, to track and have, and it's nice to have, but I want to talk and touch about the tracking the right KPIs, which is even more important because obviously, especially when we have so many data available on chain, and if we are mixing it with off-chain data, we get so much data. Can you elaborate on why you chose the present stats of the KPIs on DeepDAO? For the audience that can't see, or you're more than welcome to check out DeepDAO and see which parameters they're choosing, but they chose different parameters rather than the ones that we are seeing, for instance, on CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko or other crypto exploring tools. So can you elaborate a bit about that, maybe about the process of choosing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. We were, right from the beginning, people were telling us that DeepDAO is like a CoinGecko for DAOs. And it's true in a way because we're collecting a long list of DAOs. But DAOs are complex creatures. They're groups of people and they're coordinating and doing things together. So you really need to go deeper into understanding various things about the DAO. And it's about the organization as a whole. And then you track things like the size of the treasury and the components of the treasury. And where is this treasury being invested? Or where is the profit coming into this treasury? And then the DAO is also about people. So you really need to understand who are the main people in this DAO and how are they voting? How are they participating in the governance of the DAO? Are they voting a lot or not at all? Are they winning proposals or not? There's a lot of politics that goes into being a part of a DAO.
Like any group or organization.
Yes, exactly. And one of the things that I really love about DAOs, so in groups before the DAO revolution, if we call it that, there would always be these 3 or 4 or 5 people that I talked about earlier that dominate the action.
Top of the chain.
Exactly. And they were invisible. You knew who they are, but there was no way to put your finger and say, hey, you guys are managing everything. Let other people do take some of the responsibilities. And
yeah, but the hierarchy of the organization was a lot different. So even if you could point at the CEO, it wouldn't actually matter.
Right. But in groups that were not hierarchical, there was always a hierarchy anyway, only it was invisible. You would not see it. There's a great article called The Invisible, actually the Tyranny of Structurelessness, where the writer is talking about the invisible elite. There would be an elite to the group, but you would not be able to tell people, hey, you are the elite. They would be able to hide their domination. There's actually a lot of talk about elite in Israeli politics right now, and this is related. And so in a DAO, you cannot hide because every time you vote, we see it. And every time you win, we see it. Even more so, you can see who are the coalitions. And one of the things that was very exciting for me right from the start was to look at the coalitions in the DAO. Who are the people who vote with each other? Like the interest groups. And
so the groups within the organization.
Yes, exactly. So if the organization has 5,000 people, and you can see that 7 of these people always vote together, and together they have enough power to really determine the outcome of proposals, then you know that these people control the DAO.
So you're basically kind of crossing the information, seeing if there are anything that is similar in terms of the voting of the same people voting the same proposals, the same answers over and over again, and you're pretty much recognizing these kind of patterns, and then you're able to pretty much dictate how much centralized it actually is.
Yes, exactly. You can pretty much know if the DAO is centralized or not, and if it's centralized, you know who are the people that control it.
And these kind of things are available to check out for anyone in each specific, in each basically DAO that ever existed or listed on DeepDAO?
Yes, it's available for like 11,000 governance systems of DAOs.
Amazing. And I started off with the question of, when with all that data that we're talking about, and we can keep chatting about it, what are the prime KPIs that you're choosing and you're making visible right off the gate? and why did you choose them? I think that's something that is very important for people to understand, whether they want to maybe consider joining a DAO or maybe they're founding one. So I think it's a smart way to reverse engineer that.
Right. So I think, first of all, people want to know about the treasury. If the DAO has a lot of money, then people naturally want to join it more than other DAOs. It's natural. It's kind of sad that this is what people do, but it is what it is. So really, keeping tabs on the treasury is very important. Now, participation is also very important. If the DAO has many token holders, but only a few people participate, then you're like, okay, this DAO is under the control of a few people. But then if you see that each proposal has thousands of voters, or even hundreds of voters, or really even dozens of voters, then all of a sudden you understand that there's really a group action, and there's a community around it. And I think this would indicate the strength of the DAO.
That we're starting to see more and more use cases of people and companies that are leveraging on-chain data to gain and to basically leverage that information. We are seeing addressable as one of them, for instance, which they're doing amazing job, which is very interesting, and we'll interview the founders in the next few episodes. And that's one of the use cases that they've done that with marketing. And kind of mixing on-chain and off-chain data. What would you think are the possible use cases? Maybe something specific, maybe a few tips for founders to leverage on-chain data?
Okay, so the answer can go in many directions. Let's try to look at which use cases are natural for DAOs. And one use case, for example, is protocol DAOs. Protocol DAOs and chains. You can see that chains are being managed by groups of people, the token holders, and everybody is a stakeholder. And it's the same for protocols like Uniswap and others. And so this is a natural use case for DAOs. And then we're also, we can look at decentralized science, for example. There's a growing movement of scientists getting together and creating DAOs, and there's a reason behind that. The way that funding is happening in DAOs, in science, and the way that scientists are spread all over the world, then it makes sense for them to come together in a DAO. Now, anything about ownership makes sense to become a DAO. For example, if you want to buy an NFT that is costing a lot of money, then you may want to find the people that would buy this punk, for example, with you, and then manage it with you, and then potentially tokenize it.
By a DAO. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that is expensive in a way. And I think this is part of the whole world movement of people coming together from all over the world and doing things together. And DAOs enable that.
And if we will go outside of the DAO world, I would say, but focus rather on the on-chain data aspect of things, how would you think companies that aren't necessarily DAOs, but are within the crypto Web3 space can leverage on-chain data? So
I think there are several things in on-chain data that are typical to crypto, and one of them is transparency.
Yep.
And you can see everything that's happening. So you can see the money, the flow of money in a way that is not possible without blockchains. If you want to understand an organization in Web2, you need to really put an army of researchers and really go dig data and piece it together from many sources, where on the blockchain it's right there, it's available. And then there's the other side of groups, and that's the governance. you can also see what are the people doing and what's their flow of the flow of power in managing this group.
Mm-hmm. I think besides that, even like we've seen it with airdrops, for instance, which is something that is very controversial, especially after we're seeing so many spams being attached to it. But just as a way of thinking about, if we're talking about traditional marketing and how things are, we needed to use and integrate Facebook's algorithm, for instance, to target specific people. Now we can use and see which wallets interacted with which protocol, for instance, and check the volume of the transactions and the frequency, etc., etc. And I think that is currently and will be. We'll see. I'm sure we'll see more and more very interesting and useful use cases. Interesting angle that you brought many times during our convo is the structure and how the organization actually works. I think it applies obviously more to DAOs, because if it's not a DAO, it's the data is not on chain. But it's interesting to see even communities and other use cases within science and other verticals, which are also interesting. I wanna touch and go back to the protocol that you mentioned, and we've talked about briefly about DeepDAO. Currently, besides just listing and analyzing and checking out on-chain data, you're providing DAO tools and guidance for that. Can you elaborate more about what you're currently offering besides the analyzing and listing the data?
Yeah, so actually you touched on, you said the word bots and spam. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing right now, so we looked at the data of voters, and there are over 400,000 addresses. Maybe they're people, maybe not, who voted on 2+ DAOs. So these people are in DAOs. They're not just accidentally voting in one place. And then there are over 90,000 people who voted in 5+ DAOs. And these are, in a way, DAO professionals. Now, we were really interested in understanding if there are any vote mining going on within this group, because this is an elite group that is really a target market in its own. 90,000 people who are actually doing a lot of things on DAOs. And so we looked at patterns of voting and patterns of creating specific, in this case, snapshot spaces. And we discovered, it's an ongoing research, but so far we identified about 3,000 addresses that are really doing vote mining.
Can you elaborate about what vote mining is, just maybe in a nutshell?
Yeah, vote mining. So in crypto, like you said, there's airdrops, and people really want these airdrops, and sometimes they are doing it professionally. So maybe an airdrop doesn't give you a lot of money if you're an individual, maybe $20. Mm-hmm. But if you have 500 wallets that get each of them get these $20, and all of a sudden you have 10K, and it becomes money.
So you're talking about, I'll go and use the Web3 jargon, is you're basically farming airdrops. You're trying to maximize the rewards that a protocol or any other group is offering, by just doing what they are incentivizing you to do at a massive scale with using bots or other sorts of malicious ways to do that, basically.
Right, exactly. So people are coming to DeepDAO and they want to do an airdrop, and you want to do it to the people who are in your field. For example, if you're starting a DAO and you want to incentivize people to come and participate in your DAO, and it's in DeFi, then you come to DeepDAO and you tell them, okay, who are the people who voted in DeFi this year, so that I can give them an airdrop. Mm-hmm. And then they're also saying, okay, but remove the bots from this list. We don't want to give it to people who are just mining our airdrop and they will take our money and do nothing with it. They're not going to be part of our community. So yes, so this is exactly what's happening. We want to remove those people who are farming airdrops and identify the people who are actually of value to a new DAO or to a new tool.
So you're basically doing your own research, and then you're flagging the addresses to the DAOs or to the relevant protocols?
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And besides that, I saw that you're offering some tools to help other creators to create a DAO, things like that. Can you elaborate a bit about that? Because I think it's very important, especially when you have that stage. But overall, I think that as part of, we're constantly talking about onboarding the next billion users or anything like that. A very big and important thing is not only to allow, a better UX and not talking crypto jargon. Part of it, and maybe a big part, and that we are overlooking or not paying attention enough, is actually enabling the creators, the founders, the entrepreneurs to have that platform to onboard and to basically create more easily.
Yes, absolutely. So if we look at what happened in the last 4 years, for example, in 2019 or 2020, you really needed to be a geek to start a DAO. You need to understand code and then go on a shell and deploy something to the blockchain. And it never worked like software like always with software that it's in an early stage.
Yeah.
And now, if you want to start a DAO, you can do that in like 20 minutes. And you have maybe 10 good options to do it. So you can choose from various tools. And this is just the beginning, really, because if you're creating an organization, you need a lot of tools to manage it. Organizational software is like a huge sector in pretty much everything that has to do with organizations. So there's a very big movement of startups that create DAO tools for payment, for payroll, for various kinds of governance, for understanding your community, for incentivizing your community, for staking DAO tokens, and so on and so forth. It's amazing to see, actually, from my perspective as someone who's interested in groups, how so many tools are being created to manage groups. It's really interesting. It's something that never happened before. And the wonderful thing about crypto is that it's all funded, because all of it has a chance to really become big business.
Yep.
And so now,
go ahead.
So I think that we're probably a little bit too early for a tool marketplace, but we're not very early anymore. So I think in 1 or 2 years, there's definitely a place for a marketplace of tools, and to bring customers and tools, and really to understand how to fit a tool for a DAO.
Yep, that's very interesting, and I'm sure we're all gonna see a lot of these kinds of marketplaces. Definitely a lot to look forward to. I wanna go back and talk about the process. You mentioned back then you just started out within a DAO and you launched DeepDAO POC, but I think it will be also very useful for maybe just founders or people within, I would call it centralized or typical companies that are in the space, but are thinking about maybe taking, I would phrase it, progressive decentralization, starting to be more decentralized. Maybe they're considering it, maybe just a part of their organization. What would you suggest in terms of the process of making it decentralized? Was in DeepDAO's example, you had a core team. How decentralized was the procedures and the decisions? And if you can maybe give a few takeaways and tips for founders that are thinking about doing that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So in DeepDAO, it was born on a DAO, and the first people who helped me basically create it were the people from the DAO. And then, just like any other startup, you really need funding to start putting things at scale.
Or the DAO you're saying DeepDAO?
No, the DAO, the first DAO, the initial DAO.
Okay.
The people I met, the people in the group.
Yeah.
Were very helpful. It was amazing, actually. And so we were not a DAO. And I think that for a startup in the beginning, right now there are tools to actually start experimenting. So I would encourage people to try these tools right away. Go and create, for example, a snapshot space or an Aragon DAO or a syndicate DAO. There are many options now, really. And you can do that very easily and then add your core team and start doing votes, even if you're not doing it on crucial things, just so that you train your team and you train yourself to start making decisions in an organized way within the group. But I don't think you want to open it to a large community too soon.
Mm-hmm.
You really need you're managing a company, you're managing a product, you really need a core team that makes decisions fast, and assuming you know the people that you're working with, then you don't really need trustlessness. Hopefully you're friends and you know what you're doing and work together. You don't need a DAO for 3 people, for 4 people. But then when you start growing, definitely you would like to start involving your community and your potential customers, and then that's the time when there's it started making sense to actually potentially issue a token and start doing things with your community and the treasury that is for the community. Mm-hmm. Now in DeepDAO, we were a centralized team at the beginning, and we did some fundraising, 2 rounds of fundraising, and now we're about to we're designing a protocol actually for potentially launching a token. It's not imminent, but we hope to do it this year or at the latest next year, and start decentralizing, which I think is the right thing to do for a DAO tool like ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of like the decentralization itself, let's be practical, and I would say in terms of the like currently you have the core team. So the plan is for the core team to make the proposals, and the DAO and their members are basically voting on the proposals. Maybe some of the community members are the ones that are making the proposals. How do you see it works?
So for us specifically, we're thinking of okay. So right now there are 10,000 DAOs on DeepDAO. Some of them are loaded automatically from APIs, and our research team, that is doing an amazing job, has already touched 2,000 DAOs, 2,000. So verifying 2,000 projects. It's a lot of work. If you're thinking of scaling to millions of DAOs, you're not going to be able to do that with a centralized team. Mm-hmm. And this is why we're thinking of creating a DAO that will manage verification of data. And you will have trusted people, for example, people that will hold or stake the deep token, and they will be able to actually verify the data. And since they're token holders, they have an interest to do it correctly. And then once they do, they actually earn. They get rewards for their work. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of a flywheel of.
They're kind of the validators of the chain. If I would be able to just do a small comparison.
Yeah, exactly. This is a very good analogy.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, interesting to see. I have a lot of follow-up questions, but unfortunately we don't have enough time for that. But I guess if I'm able to just ask one of them, is in terms of the gatekeeping and choosing the validators themselves, because obviously you mentioned about their incentive to do the validation, but what's the process of choosing them?
Okay, so I'm thinking that we do have a DAO participation score that measures DAO participation and ranks millions of addresses.
Got it.
And I think choosing from the top 100,000 of this list makes sense at the beginning. And also there are some people who are familiar to us and are trusted. And also, like I said, once they stake enough tokens, they're trusted because they're stakeholders themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yep, makes sense. And if you are touching and we're going to the off-chain world on off-chain data, you have any plans on integrating off-chain data too to complement the on-chain and off-chain data on DAOs? I mean, in terms of like followers, maybe Discord members, social activity, things like that.
So I've been asked this question for the past 2 or 3 years, and at first I said no, we're not going to do it because it's too easy, and we're doing stuff that is harder. But now there are a lot of aspects to being in a DAO and managing a DAO, and a lot of it is happening on Discord. I personally don't like it that DAOs are on Discord to such an extent, because again, it's like a Web2 platform, and they keep the data and they keep the data for themselves. I'd like to see DAOs do it in a decentralized way, maybe on decentralized social protocols. But we are a business, so and there is demand for it. So yes, most likely we'll dive into that as well.
Yeah, yeah. You're gonna give them what they want eventually.
At least in some sense, yes.
Yep, makes sense. All right, so we are about to finish this very interesting episode. We're gonna wrap it up with 5 questions in 5 minutes or less. Just to get to know you a bit more personally and less about DeepDAO. You ready to start?
Sure. I'm already panicking from the favorite book thing.
I think we'll just start off with that, then the rest would be easier.
So it's difficult to answer. There's so many books. But recently I read My Brilliant Friend, and I was surprised because it's a bestseller, and usually I'm not necessarily like the bestseller lover, but it's a brilliant book. It's a great book. So I love that one.
All right, so we'll put that in the show notes for anyone interested. Maybe it's a bit too obvious to ask, but let's do it a bit more interesting. Besides DeepDAO, what's your favorite DAO?
I can't answer that. I have to be neutral. I do have favorites. I love several DAOs, but
you're the father of the DAO, so you can't really
exactly.
All right, you can favor one. What's your go-to place for checking off-chain data on crypto and Web3?
I have several sites, not necessarily off-chain. I sort of go to on-chain services like Nansen and Messari and DeFi Llama and things like that.
The Degen stuff, the Degen stuff.
Yeah, and others. I'm mentioning our competitors as well. So
yeah,
but
makes sense.
People are doing good jobs.
Yeah, for sure. Personally, and it's all personally, it's important to say, which industry you're most excited about?
Which industry in general?
Yeah, but if you're applying it to Web3 and the potential use cases, so whether it's finance, music, gaming, etc.
I think NFTs are just at the very, very beginning. It can and should go much deeper than profile pictures, and the potential to actually own an NFT together and then to tokenize it and to manage large assets together. For example, like Constitution DAO was an amazing experiment.
Yeah.
And organizations like City DAO that actually buys land, and there's an initiative to buy an NBA team, and I'm an NBA fan. NBA is the American basketball league. I would love to be a part of a DAO that actually buys an NBA team, but they cost a lot. So
a lot of interesting use cases, and I got an example of someone that says I can't recall his name. Who was it? But he mentioned that the NFT, the use case of NFTs is like the use case of the apps. Back then in like 2008, 2009, the most successful apps was the drinking app of a beer that you can virtually drink a beer. So I think we went past that a bit more, but we definitely were just scratching the surface, and we'll see a lot more interesting use cases. I'll finish up with an optimistic. We're looking into the future. So 10 years from now, where do you see DeepDAO?
Where do I see DeepDAO in 10 years? Ask me about 2 years or 5 years. 10 years is a lot of time. I think
so 5 years.
I think there would be hundreds of thousands or millions of DAOs on DeepDAO, and people that would want to look at organizational data would come to DeepDAO to understand organizations and to actually manage their participation in their own organizations.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to see that. Eyal, where the people can find you besides going to your website, where they can follow you?
So actually, the site is https DeepDAO.io, and you can follow us on Twitter, DeepDAO_IO. And
Put
you
the
can
links
follow
in the
me
show
on
notes.
Twitter. It's Itzko.
Amazing. We'll put that also. Eyal, thanks again for coming, and thanks for everyone that listened. Have a great day ahead, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Neil. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.